state of the Sixers. I got my man John Mitchell with me, and we're going to talk about the state of the Sixers.
You are Locked On 76ers, your daily Philadelphia 76ers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On 76ers your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Yo, what's up, Mitch? How you been, bro?
Keith, what's happening, man? How are you, brother?
I could complain, but you just don't want to listen. But I'm glad to have you on the pod, huh?
It's good to be on the pod, man. And I can commiserate with you with those end of the summer blues as the marathon quickly approaches. So I know how you feel.
Yeah. For y'all who don't know, and some of y'all who don't remember, I know a lot of y'all do. You know, John Mitchell covered the Sixers before I did. He actually handed the baton off to me, and he's been a great brother. He knows so much about sports. Used to work at the Inquirer with me. Been doing this thing, and we still bust it up from time to time. And hey, I go to him to get knowledge, right? But see, today what we're going to talk about is we got three things to talk about. First, we're going to talk about James Harden getting fined $100,000. You know, I still keep shaking my head over that because I know some of y'all may think James, he messed up, but I still think the league was wrong for fining him. Secondly, we're going to talk about Joel Embiid and Harden, but mainly Joel, because John was dropping some knowledge, called me on the phone. He got some stats about Joel, whereas Joel has to step it up in the postseason, right? That has to start with him. And then thirdly, Evan Turner said something about Philadelphia. And, you know, John and I are both from Philly. I grew up in Frankfurt. John is from West Philly. He went to Overbrook. And we both know we lived other places too. Philly ain't for everybody. So we got to talk about that. It ain't for everybody. But John, all right. So I know like Harden's been in the news. He signed that contract. He did what he did. But he also got he said what he said about Daryl Morey. He called him a liar, right? He said he would never play, and I'm paraphrasing right now, that he would never be a part of a team that Daryl Morey is a part of, right? Well, the league fined him $100,000 for those comments, basically saying that he was like requesting the trade and saying things like that. I felt that was kind of harsh because to me, the biggest takeaway was he said that he called the man a liar. And when you see somebody, in my opinion, saying this guy's a liar, you got freedom of speech. You can say what you want. Never did he say now he said, I would never be a part of a team that he's a part of, right? But you can assume that to be, I'm retiring, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I don't know what he said to these people in the meeting that he had, the investigation talking about Harden, but at the same time, like, I find it hard to get out his statement in China of him saying, I request to be traded publicly. And I felt like that was kind of tough for me for the league to do to a guy.
Yeah, and I see where you're coming from, Keith. I mean, let's get it out the air first. That $100,000 is probably less than he paid for that Rolex that he gave Joel when he won the MVP award. So it's not going to hurt his pocket. But he like you said, he didn't directly request a trade. You know, he basically said he would never play for an organization that Daryl Morey was a part of. And with Daryl Morey being the 76ers general manager, he's basically saying, I want out. But I think it's unfair. I agree with you there. It's unfair to put words in his mouth and to say that, yeah, this is basically him saying I want to trade, because he never did clearly say that. You know, it's like it's the shell game that we see in a lot of media today, where people see something, they hear something, they interpret it to mean something. But the bottom line was, James was saying, I won't be a part of an organization that Daryl Morey is a part of. So, you know, I think what that does do is it brings it down. You know, the Sixers have to think they haven't experienced great success with Daryl Morey. They know that if they jettison James Harden, the talent level, which was second round, you know, not getting to the third round, if you had to play a Boston in the second round, it begins to it starts to decrease. They're as a team, they start to decrease. They're not as effective. So they are in, once again, a calamitous situation in the summertime. The 76ers arrive to this point every summer, it seems like, where just something catastrophic has happened. It's nothing that we see across the league. But you do make a good point. You know, for them to intimate that he was requesting a trade is incorrect.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, we all know he wants out. We all know he, like, the Sixers came out and said that's what he wants, right?
Right.
The thing is, though, to me, it just seems like, you know, right now the league is trying to pull back. I mean, or try to get stuff back, because the players have basically player empowerment.
Right.
You got all these guys requesting trades, all these guys trying to get out, doing what they want to do, right? Everything. And I feel like they're trying to make an example of the dude. But the one thing that I don't like is, you know, you take a guy and sometimes it seems like, are you trying to break him? Now, again, it's one of those things where this brother is going to make $35.6 million this season. Right. He done made over $300 million in basketball alone. Like you said, he paid more for that watch to give to Joel. He goes on vacation with probably more money in his pocket, right? Not in his pocket, but on his person, right? So I get what you're saying 100%. It just seemed to me like, and I'm glad the Players Association is you know, trying to fight for him. But to me, it just seemed as if that was a little much based off of what he said. And I just felt like they trying to lower the hammer on the brother. But again, I get where some people feel. There's a lot of people in Philly like, look, fine him $1 million, fine him $2 million, dock his pay. Because what they really want is they just want him out of there. But to me, fair is fair. You know what I mean? Like, James Harden doesn't need me to take up for him. He doesn't need me to go to bat for him. But to me, it's kind of like fair is fair, and is weird. It just seems weird that if a player calls an executive a liar, you get fined for that. Like, freedom of speech. And that's the only thing I didn't like.
Yeah, and for him to, I mean, we don't know yet what was specifically said between those two. I know when that is found out, you'll be the person to break it, as you always do, breaking 76ers news. But I mean, let's be honest. When it is, it's his labor versus. It's always now labor versus management, and you touched on it earlier. You know, they're trying. You know, management / ownership is trying to get the toothpaste back in the bottle. You know, between the 76ers are ground zero for this stuff. You know, between the Ben Simmons, I refuse to play for them. You know, 2 years later, guy who's on their top 75 of all time list, I don't want to be affiliated with the 76ers. So, you know, they're going to find him because, you know, they're the billionaires and he is a millionaire. And it's management versus labor, ownership versus player. And, you know, they're going to try. If the only way to bring the hammer down on them is to bring it down on them financially. There's no other way to do it.
You're 100% right. When we get back, we're going to talk about, I'm going to give, you know, let you bring up that stuff that you researched about Joel Embiid and stuff like that. So we'll talk about that when we get right back. But right now, I want to talk to y'all about Ibotta. Picking up burgers and hot dogs for a summer barbecue. You know you're already doing it. So why not get cash back for it with Ibotta? Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of groceries items from produce to personal care to pantry goods. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop and get your cash back. It's that easy. Right now, Ibotta is offering listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta and using the code LOCKED when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use code LOCKED. That's Ibotta at the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKED. I'm telling y'all, do it today, people. Definitely do it today. All right, John. So just break it down to me, man, because you know what? You are right. You know, Joel Embiid, you know, the one thing that Joel Embiid really has to work on the next phase of his game to go to the next level is stepping his game up in the postseason. He got some people, you can argue that he's been injured, he's been healthy. So he got to get healthy too, right? He got to make sure that he's healthy. But when you look at his stats, unfortunately for Joel, most other elite players, Hall of Fame type players, what they do is their numbers from the regular season elevates once they get to the postseason, right? They take a step forward, and his hasn't. And you've done that research, and can you share what you found out with it?
Yeah, I mean, when you see him, he's a generational talent for 82 games, and usually into the first round of the playoffs. But I was looking at some numbers, and I was just looking at Joel's performance in the 2 games in 2022 and 2023 in which they were eliminated again in the game against Miami, game 6 against Miami, and game 7 in Boston. And, you know, in those 2 games combined, Joel averaged 17.5 points per game in those 2. It's just 2 games. It's a small sample size. But these are the games when you determine the guy who's the baddest guy at the poker table. He shot 12 for 42 from the floor in game 6 against Miami and game 7 against Boston this season. And you simply, no matter, you know, people started to point the finger at Doc Rivers, but, you know, Joel started saying things like, well, they're not getting me the ball. Now, you know, I covered Michael Jordan. Granted, I covered him in Washington, but I covered him when he was playing for the Bulls. And I'm not comparing a guy who's never gotten beyond the second round of Michael Jordan. But let's be honest, he is a generational talent. All the skill is there. I can't imagine Michael Jordan being on the court for the final 4 minutes of that game. I think it was a game 6 against Boston where they didn't get him the ball. Either the players made that decision to not get him the ball because maybe they got tired of seeing him drifting out to the elbow and shooting, you know, those jump shots when they needed him at the basket to get and ones. Now, I know I'm old school. People tell me I'm antiquated. The game's not played that way, and I agree. But, you know, you have to play to your strengths when they're there. You know, I just compare him to Nikola Jokic. Whenever he gets the ball, if you watch the playoffs, and I know you did, when he gets the ball out on the perimeter and they've thrown a 6'5", 6'4" guy on him, he plays bully ball from the 3-point line down to the rim and gets to the basket. You know, and Joel has to do that. Joel cannot settle for these jump shots from the elbow and from the nail. It's, you know, it's kind of like I compare it oftentimes to if Lamar Jackson is your quarterback. Granted, Lamar's got a cannon for an arm, but his biggest strength is playing with his legs. Although that gets him in trouble sometimes in the playoffs. But you have to play to your strength. Guys in the NBA, in today's NBA, don't even have a clue how to guard or defend the post. So you've got this 7'2", 280, 285-pound guy who doesn't take advantage of it. And Rasheed Wallace had an interesting take on that, Rasheed talked about that. He said, listen, Joel, all this hanging around and taking the 13-footer and the 15-footer, that's not going to get it done. Joel is at the point in his career. I mean, let's be honest. What is he, 28 years old, 28?
You're about 29, yeah.
29. That body's an old 29. That body's, I mean, we know that his body's not going, when he gets into his early 30s, I don't know how strong he's going to be at 32 and 33, but I don't foresee him being having a long career. We went through they're going to load manage him wherever he is. But you guys, if you're going to win with Joel, you've got to do it now. If you look at look at the two, the Miami game. If you just the Boston games, he's 9 for 19, 26 points. 0 for 2. This is game 6. He's 0 for 2 from the 3-point line. He's 0 for 4 in the 3-point line. He came back in the closeout game, was 5 for 18. That's just not going to get it done, particularly when the best player on the other team is going for 50 or 55 or whatever it was that he went for. And so we give Joel the benefit of the doubt because we fall in love and we get enamored with everything he can do. From a skill set standpoint, I've never seen anybody who can do what he can do, but you need him to do it in late May and June. That's what you get paid. That's what you get the 100. That's what you get the Supermax contract to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, I think that's the next step for him, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is. The one thing is for him, you hope, and for the Sixers, you hope that perhaps maybe looking at Nikola Jokic, seeing what he did in the postseason might elevate him a little bit. Now, the good part is that for Joel is he got his bucket list of one MVP,
right?
Something that he wanted to accomplish. Not a lot of 76ers did that.
Right.
He got he got 2 scoring titles. He's in his career with the Sixers, he's won. Well, he was number 1 in the East one year, had the best record in the Eastern Conference.
Right.
He's done a lot of different things, but they all ended up with his numbers being worse in the postseason than the regular season, and they all had second round finishes.
Right.
So when I saw a photo of him today, where he looked in way back, like he looked more chiseled. He looked.
I saw that photo.
Yeah, you saw that. So, and then before the season, before the season was over with, he talked about, taking care of his body, doing all types of things. So maybe less will be more this regular season in order for him to, he doesn't have to worry about winning the scoring title. He doesn't have to worry about becoming an MVP because at the end of the day, he's not going to be judged by that anymore. He's going to be judged by what happens in the postseason. Right. So, you know what I mean? If you're the Sixers and if you're Nick Nurse, you're basically hoping him that's going to be the focus. Like, don't worry about Joel. You're going to be an all-star starter again.
Right.
You're going to be that. Don't worry about it.
You can do that. He can do that in his sleep, Keith.
He
can do that in his sleep.
I agree 100%. Well, when we get right back, we'll talk about how Philly isn't just for everybody. It's not for everyone. All right, John. So look, you were watching. What was it? Was whose podcast was it when you saw that information?
It was Gilbert Arenas. It was Gil, Evan Turner, Andre Iguodala, and somebody else. And the confluence was Andre and Evan both played in Philly, and they were talking about the Harden situation, and they agreed. They were like, listen. And they actually were saying that Joel is next, that Joel's going to be wanting to ask out next. And they said, without Harden, what does he have at this point? and it was interesting because Evan Turner started to run his mouth, and I covered Evan. That was toward the end of my tenure covering the 76ers. And Evan had some interesting things to say about Philadelphia. He basically called Philadelphia an armpit. He called the fans unintelligent, and that's using gentle English to describe what he said. He was really hard on Philly, and I was saying to myself, I said, Evan, you didn't really come here and produce. You didn't come here and produce, and like you and I were talking off air. Philly ain't for everybody, But the one thing I will say is if you play for Philly and you fight and you fight hard all the time, the athletes love the city. If you'll never hear Brian Dawkins played in the Mile High City. He loves Philadelphia. He loves his experience as being Weapon X in Philadelphia. Allen Iverson played in Denver towards the end of his career after the 76ers had failed to build around his talent. And what did he do when he came back home? He kissed center court. But those guys left it all, to steal a cliche, they left it all on the floor. And if Philly fans are, if you talk to NBA players, you talk to NFL players, none of them will tell you that Philly fans are not smart and don't know what they're watching. Philly fans don't turn on you. Philly fans will evaluate your performance right there on the spot. And if you're not performing, Philly fans are going to let you know. And I think it's a badge of honor. Sometimes it gets Philly fans in trouble. But look how they just treated Trey Turner. Philly shortstop. He all of a sudden now he can't miss with the Phillies. He's getting game-winning hits. And look how Bryce Harper has embraced the city. These are all guys who are playing. So you see it, guys who don't give what's expected of them. Philly's not going to be for you. And Evan Turner clearly fell in that category.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the fans. And Phil, actually, we're both from Philly, so it's. I'm gonna share something with you. It might have been back in the day when you were covering the Wizards. So I remember one year, it was right before I came to the Inquirer. I was living in Myrtle Beach, and so. Yeah, how long? So it might have been probably about 2002. Were you covering the Wizards back then?
Yeah, I was firmly in Washington then.
Okay, so the Wizards were at that particular point. I remember the Wizards were bad, and so were the New Jersey Nets at that time. I believe, right?
They were horrible.
So they were horrible. So I go to a game. A buddy of mine was living in D.C. I drove up from Myrtle Beach, and he's like, "Yo, I got tickets for this game." So we go to the game, man. It was the worst half of basketball I've ever seen, the first half. So as the players came off the floor, I stood up and started booing. Boo, boo, boo. So then my friend is like, look, man, we ain't in Philly.
Yeah.
Like, you don't do that down here. And I was like, what? What you mean? Like,
pay my money?
They're like, they paid their money for this. They're not upset. And he was like, nah, it's a little different. So to me, I was a little taken aback because the fans weren't as passionate.
Right.
In my opinion, because dude, down there, it was just it was different.
It was horrible.
It was horrible so I understand where the passion comes from. But again, this is something like Philly isn't for everybody.
It's not.
It's not. We talked about that. Like I've heard stories about certain dudes when they're free agency, they'll rather go to New York or go somewhere else. Or now New York is New York. Like you go to New York, you go to Miami, you go other places because of the market or the other things that you can do off the court. Right. But some people don't want to come here and get that smoke. They don't. That's what they don't want to come here and get that smoke. But one thing you did say is they love you if you play hard. Like originally, TJ McConnell didn't get a lot of love. Every time he comes back to Philly, they cheer for him. Right. Other players, it's just playing hard, being grit. But the thing is, if you come up and you come up short and you making a lot of money and you come up short, or you come up soft, they're gonna run you out of Philly.
Yeah, you're going to pay the Philly tax, and that's you're going to get booed, because I mean, even the superstars, when they're playing below the expectation, and it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be interesting watching the Eagles this year, because and not to talk about them, but the expectations, when you hear everything about the Eagles now, the expectations are so high, but they do have that stretch late in the season where they play about 7 straight playoff games, and it's you won't be seeing the bad squads that you played against last year, So, but yeah, Philly's a different town, and I know you notice it as you travel from city to city and see the different responses you get. From different crowds, and what they're willing to tolerate and what they're not willing to tolerate. But when they're behind you in Philly, they're behind you 100%. But they're going to. It's like a marriage. You expect to be able to be critical of your spouse, and it's not this Russian marriage like some cities have, where it's okay. Hey, I'm not going to be critical. This is an arranged situation. It's we took these vows together as Philly fans, and it's just different. It's different, but I think it's wonderful. It's wonderful to win in Philadelphia, despite our reputation.
I agree 100%, man. I agree 100. I agree, and it's like we said, it's not for everyone, but at the same time, if you win here, you're going to be legendary here. And look at Allen Iverson; he hasn't won, but he played with grit, right? Look at Bryce Harper; they love him.
They love him.
Look at Doc, like B Doc, like you said, is a great example of it. You know what I mean?
And just look at that home run. The Bryce. I mean, Bryce is a postseason player. Look at that home run he hit last year in the playoffs. And that's what the city wants to see out of Joel, because they love Joel. Joel's very easy to like. He's affable. He communicates with people on social media. He's at Eagles games, but now he's at that point now where it's like, bro, you've got to win. It's been 40 years. It's been 40 years. It's been a lifetime ago since they had a championship. I graduated from Overbrook in 1983 to tell my age, and I considered that my high school graduation present. I didn't need anything else from anybody else. I was like, finally, after all those years of we owe you one, and blowing games in Boston and wanting to pick up my TV and throw it out the window, it's time for Joel to win, and he'll be much better received if he's not asking for a trade in 2024 and saying I can't win here.
But you know what? I don't blame if he does ask for a trade. I don't blame him. I'm gonna be real. I'm gonna blame. I mean, because dude, this stuff has been. It's been a decade full of drama. Now, again, it's some things that he could have done better, right?
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? But at the same time, it's like, this stuff has been crazy. But I don't blame him.
Yeah, their shortcomings, I will say, have been their postseason shortcomings have been less his fault and more the front office's failure. I mean, you make fatal decisions when you get Markelle Fultz and Ben Simmons, and they become what they become with the number one pick. You don't really. That's like a surgeon sewing up a patient and leaving the scalpel on the inside. You just don't bounce back from that. Not in pro sports, you don't.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's a good one. That's crazy. I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna write that in one of my articles.
I expect to see it, bro. No problem with that.
Yeah. I'm having parentheses. Thanks, John Mitchell. But John, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I want to thank y'all for listening. And I want y'all to know you can come and get this podcast. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. And while you're at it, go to the YouTube channel. When you go to the YouTube channel, click on the Liberty Bell. And then when you do that, you become a new subscriber. And you also get notifications when we have our next podcast. But thanks, John, man. It's good busting it up with you.
Absolutely. Glad to have
Sixers,
you.
man.
Glad to be here, Keith.
Yeah. All right. All right, y'all. Thanks for listening. Peace.